Morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It's Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. It is 10:06 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. We have Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier, Commissioner Gary Edwards, Commissioner Carolina Mejia, and Commissioner Emily Klaus all on the Zoom platform. And we have officials from the City of Lacey, which we're very thankful for their presence today to have a discussion about an encampment response and just questions from the board. The public can follow along on Thurston County YouTube channel. We have until 11, and I'm going to ask the interim county manager to kind of set us up.
Yes, good morning. So this morning we are here to talk about the encampment response, specifically regarding one encampment that the City of Lacey is partnering with the state of Washington and they are in the process of removing the people that are currently there. And I would invite the city to tell us more about the process that is being used for this clearance of the encampment. The things that the county had heard were that there are, if you will, two sets of people at the encampment. There are people that have been there for some time that are on a list, if you will, that are going through one process, and then there is possibly a second group of people that are not being offered the same services as the first group, and that there is a different process for them. And the county is just trying to get clarity on what these processes are, how they interact, what the timeline is, and what services might be provided to each of the different groups. So that's why we asked all of you to be here today. Thank you very much for coming in, especially on short notice. And I would ask Commissioner Mejia, in particular, if that encapsulates the questions for this morning.
Yes, thank you. I believe so. I think the clarification between also like the Department of Enterprise Services cleanup versus what the City of Lacey is doing. I believe there's just some mixed signals and there's a lot of confusion happening. And I think as jurisdictional partners, it's hard to get out what is going on in the community, right, without kind of knowing. And so I think that, kind of just walkthrough would be great for everyone.
Sure.
Great.
I can go ahead. If I could, and I just say, if I could, I think it's helpful also to have sort of lay out some of the history as well of this. And I think part of the confusion potentially is just really kind of this path and the commitments and requirements that exist versus sort of the conversations we've had regionally, and really understanding sort of where all those handoffs are would be great as well.
Okay. Before you jump in, I'm sorry, since you called on Commissioner Mejia, Commissioner Klaus, I know you were the one that initially brought a set of questions to us. Did you have anything you wanted specifically covered, and you can also ask questions later, I'm sure. I just want to give you that opportunity before these guys get going.
Not at this time, but I will have some questions later.
Okie doke. Very good. Thank you.
Well, I'll kick off, and then Chief has most of the background on how we've managed the camp with his community resource unit. But and I'm Grant Beck, Planning Development Services Manager. And I guess I'd start by saying the basic premise of the question is not accurate. We're managing this process just like every other right-of-way process from the right-of-way initiative. The only difference is we've been doing it since 2021. So
when we contracted with, developed the MOU with Department of Enterprise Services back in 2021, at that time, they requested that we create basically a by names list and offer people services and housing and not let new people in as people got housed. We started out with 26 campers, and we're down to the 8 that are on the list right now. Consistently throughout that time period, we've been trespassing at the request of the property owner, any new campers that come on. So there's not two groups out there. There's a group who have been there on the list for a long time, and a group that we think it's between 6 and 10, that a couple of them were trespassed last week. The rest of them would be trespassed through our normal process from 2021, if they're actually living there. According to the CRU unit, they have not identified themselves as campers on the property to CRU, most likely because they know that the property is posted no trespassing. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I don't think we're doing anything different. Just like at Slater Kinney, at some point in time, the property owner said, now's the time to create the list of who gets offered housing and who's been trespassed. It's just our point in time was 2021. Ryan, did I miss anything?
I don't think so, unless maybe the chief wants to give some of the history on the CRU's outreach.
So to be clear, our history with the Rights of Way Initiative, and now known as the Encampment Resolution Program through the state, goes back to basically the beginning of COVID, as you just had a discussion about COVID, going back to 2020, working on a property, was in the right of way adjacent to one of our businesses along Slater Kinney. We had some 74 individuals there camping at one point. And again, working with the state, came to an agreement that the folks there would be put on a list and they would be allowed to stay there until the completion of COVID. There was a moratorium on trespass and evictions and things like that nature. And so what we would do is we would go out and make contact with these folks, get to know their story, provide water, blankets, food, those type of things, provide access to services, first with a service navigator through Community Action Corps, and now through Olympic Health Recovery Services, we have a MOT team, Mobile Outreach Team, which is a team of 2 teams, each with a clinician and someone with lived experience, a peer support specialist, credentialed and everything else through Olympic Health Recovery Services, go out and make contact with the folks in these encampments. And over the course of time, we've been able to find better outcomes for these individuals. Some have left on their own volition to find other things. We've got people back reconnected to family. We've got folks connected to services. We work with 40 different nonprofit organizations throughout the county, several of which you know about, Oxford, Drexel, a host of services, frankly, trying to get people to better outcomes. As you know, through the county and Lacey and other municipalities entered into an agreement with Commerce to transition the Days Inn into Maple Court, operated by Lehigh, to provide support services. And through this latest initiative, since this is a state property, it was made so that folks that were still remaining at the Desmond site were allowed to be entered into Maple Court. So we've been working on that transition process. We continually go out and make contact with these folks on a daily basis and make sure that when they're okay, frankly, check on their welfare and well-being, but also make sure they know they have access to services. They've all gone through coordinated entry and assessment. Now it's incumbent on those folks to stay in contact to make sure they're still on the list. Some people have fallen off the list because they have gone out of contact. But the idea is to give folks access to services and to a better living condition, rather than living in the dirt, frankly, and with no heat, no cover, no access to running water, no septic system, frankly exposed to the elements. So trying to get people into a house environment, which Maple Court offers. So that offer's been made for the final 8. Currently, 3 have been moved at the request to Maple Court with the assistance of OLIMAP. And there's 3 now waiting. There was a frozen pipe issue at Maple Court yesterday, so it wasn't able to happen yesterday. As soon as they were able to resolve that issue, the rest will be moved over. At the request, it's my understanding that at least 2 are non-committal about moving to Maple Court. We received some documentation late yesterday about a possibility of some other issues. supplement to that, and I believe DES is reviewing that. Again, this is all at the behest of DES, the property owner. The city of Lacey has no stakeholder right in this, frankly. We are simply administrators. When called upon by any property owner regarding a trespass issue, we go out and we enforce trespass at their direction. And again, I've heard this characterized as a sweep. I don't believe this is a sweep. We don't engage in sweeps. We go out, we contact folks, we learn their story, we try to get them to a better outcome, we try to connect them with services. And this is done over a time period. Again, folks knew this was coming. We provided weeks and weeks and weeks of notice that eventually this date was coming, that DES is going to want everybody off their property. They want to return back to the state it was. It is an ecologically sensitive area. It feeds into pretty sensitive watershed. There's some concerns with that as well. So DES is now moving forward with their property rights and have asked us to come in. So, and again, we like to take a timely approach. We take our time, we talk to folks, we go to the story. We don't want to take an enforcement action if we don't have to. And by and large, we haven't had to take any enforcement action. Now, other folks have come that weren't on the original list. They've been characterized as visitors, frankly, to the camps. And we advise them, you can't set up a new camp, you can't stay here, it's no trespass, they're advised of that. There have been a couple of arrests of folks that have felony warrants, frankly, but that's been the only arrests that have happened at this location. So frankly, I think we are well served. And the city provides good resources to folks. We really work not to criminalize homelessness or the effects of homelessness, and to make sure we get people to a better outcome.
I think one of the other points, if you could cover it, too, is just sort of the process piece of it. Because I think one of the questions and concerns that we've had come up has been related to, okay, the 72 hours, and what does that really mean? Is it 72 hours and then boom, or 72 hours and that really begins another process of sort of the notice or citations, and so, which has its own timeline, right?
So what happens is, once person is frankly refuse services and refuse the housing option, at that point, they're under trespass, they're given 3 days to leave the property, 72 hours, and we come back in 72 hours or 84, it's not exactly 72, it depends on how it functions with the work schedule. And at that point, if the person is still there, they haven't moved, they're issued a citation.
And so what happens with the citation?
And the citation that goes to the court system and the city prosecutor, and it goes through that process.
And that generally runs how long does that take to unfold?
Couple, 3 weeks, depends. And then it's up to the court to decide.
For the first hearing.
For the first hearing,
Yeah.
yes.
And the property,
Sorry?
that's somebody's personal property of the people that have gotten the citation? What's the
Well, they're still
process?
there, they're not moved.
Yeah.
So it's
We
basically.
don't put hands on it, we issue them a citation, and then we walk away. So their property's untouched, everything's still there.
So it goes through the court system.
Right, and they're given a court date, and they're expected to go to court to answer for the citation for failure to move after 72 hours. After being advised 72 hours prior that they're supposed to leave. And then it's up to the court at that point to decide what they want to do with the case, and then it follows that process. And then we take our instruction from the court at that point.
So that would allow time, the county's looking for time to take a question to the Regional Housing Council, to make a request for emergency funding to provide additional services to the people who are there after I'm gonna call them the core 8, are moved into housing or
It's probably the
wherever
core
they're
5 now, but yes.
Okay.
But yes, so the city of Lacey, we want to get people to a better outcome, so we're not against that. And I'm sure DES would be happy for folks to get services. But the point is that they've been offered housing, they've been offered services, they've been offered these options, and they haven't taken those. So I'm not sure what other options they would take. I know DES wants to move forward with their property rights, so I would be a discussion with DES, not with us.
And I think that would, just at the Housing Council, that's a discussion for them, but there wasn't emergency funding for the folks at Slater Kinney or any of the other right-of-way encampments who weren't on the by names list, so.
Understand.
Commissioner Mejia and then Commissioner Klaus. Go ahead, Commissioner Mejia.
Thank you. And Robin pinpointed a lot of, I understand that this is a separate contract between the city of Lacey and, the state, not trying to get in the middle of that. I just, from our perspective is just, again, the communications piece of it. While this encampment was on the list, right? We've known that this sweep is coming. We just never knew when it was actually going to happen. And as jurisdictional partners in the Regional Housing Council, right? Like we've done a lot of work to try to communicate better with each other and build this relationship of trust and really move forward together. And so my I guess my request to wait for the Regional Housing Council to meet was not to delay your contract, but in a way to, whenever there's a cleanup happening and some people don't accept housing for different reasons. One of the reasons I've heard is because of, they would like to go in a place where it's clean and it's sober housing. And so just requests like that, I think it's the Regional Housing Council can have a conversation on the best way to support. And whenever there is a cleanup, whether it's a sweep or not, whenever, right, those individuals have to go somewhere and it affects all of us jurisdictionally. And so having that conversation regionally, I think, in a legislative body, I think would be a good approach for us to help support, as well as see if there's any other resources that we can use to assist in this. And so that was my reasoning, I guess, for that request. Was the Regional Housing Council meets on the 24th. I've even though I'm not the representative on there anymore, I have asked for staff to have this conversation, as a whole body on, like, is there funding that we can assist, with this, knowing that there are some individuals that, they were partners and, in 2 years now, one is on the list and the other one is not, right? And I know for a fact I wouldn't want to leave, without my partner. And there are just differing situations that happen, right? Life happens. And so just kind of wanting to have that conversation as a regional body, I think it's important, and just trying to kind of abide by that timing.
So, excuse me, sure. Just to correct the timing thing, this is not new, and we've been having this discussion at the right-of-way meetings. I mean, I think I've been advocating for the ecology site to be able to be part of that initiative for at least a year. And we've been, on the timing-wise, we've been waiting on Commerce to make the decision, but that discussion's been going on for at least, Keely, 2 months?
Oh, yeah.
2.5? Yeah, so it should not be a surprise to the board or anybody that it was next up. I mean, we've known that it was the next camp up, again, 2 months?
Well, I guess I would say, sorry,
No,
jump in.
go ahead.
We just found out from Commerce, right after the first of the new year, that Desmond was next. So we weren't officially notified by Commerce
We were
because
waiting for them to
Percival
make
was
the
also
decision.
on the list, right? So we knew
Yeah.
it was coming. But we didn't find out until early January that we had authorization from Commerce.
Keely?
Yeah, and absolutely, I was gonna say that Desmond and Percival, both camps have been up for debate while Slater Kinney was being, taken care of, Nickerson and Wheeler. And so I know that on the road, we meet weekly with the right-of-way partners, and for weeks, every week for months, we've asked which is next, which is next, which is next, because Olympia Mutual Aid Partners is contracted to do the outreach to build the by name list. And it was clear, like Lacey's like, we're good, and OLIMAP's like, that's great, we'll help you. But it became, we'll help you move. So there didn't have any tension there at all. I think that OLIMAP was just like, great, we'll just help you how we can. But then discovering that they were more than the 8 people was part of this conversation. The other part is, Desmond wasn't identified as moving next until the first of the year, as you said, but then a timeline wasn't established until last week, on Tuesday. And so I think there was a little bit of urgency around the cold weather, which is what moved it forward. But the other camps of all sizes had 4 to 6 weeks of prep time to like build a by name list, make sure everybody's good. Granted, they were larger camps, but they had, most of them took 4 weeks minimum to get people squared away, and to make that offering of housing. So I think a lot of the confusion also is the onus is on the Department of Commerce's guidance, because it's been really inconsistent. So for instance, City of Olympia the Nickerson camp belongs to City of Olympia, and they asked for a new by name list to be made after a by name list had been made by OLIMAP and the city. And then they said, no, city, not good enough, we want to build a second by name list. And so that was okay back in August, but it was like, that's not the same for Desmond, according to Department of Commerce as well, so.
Okay, I got 3 people in line. I'm going to go in order. Commissioner Klaus.
Okay, just a couple questions so far. I came in a little bit late, so I apologize if you said this right before I came in, but has the 72-hour notice been given at this point?
No.
Not yet, okay. And is that due to the pipes at Maple Court, or is there some other factor? Okay, that's the only factor that is delaying the 72-hour notice? Okay. A couple things I wanted to address. You mentioned that you all work with a lot of nonprofits to ensure that there are plenty of liaisons when something like this is going to happen. However,
Well, all the time. So
All the
mobile
time.
outreach team is citywide,
Okay.
the city of Lacey. It's not just encampments. We go out, we find people in crisis, we find people that are homeless, and we offer them services, whether at an encampment or not.
right, but today we're talking about the Desmond camp, which is what I'm getting at. And OLIMAP, one of the primary liaisons to refer people to Maple Court, also did not know about this until Tuesday or Wednesday, giving them very minimal time to react and get people where they need to be. Additionally, the mobile outreach team you mentioned goes out on a daily basis is that to this camp or just in general? They're going out somewhere every day?
So they try to contact everybody every day, yes.
Okay,
throughout the
I
city
know
of
for a
Lacey.
fact that that's not happening. So if that's a goal of the mobile outreach team, then we're gonna need to like audit that process or look closer at that
I'm
process.
sorry, why would you audit our program? I don't understand.
Well, the mobile outreach team is not going out to Desmond on a daily
I'm
basis.
sorry, why would you audit a Lacey program that's fully funded by
Oh, I'm
by
saying
Lacey?
that program
don't
needs to be
understand.
audited. And if you could let me finish my questions, that would be great.
Well, I don't know, I'm waiting for a question. I'm sorry,
Okay.
you've
Well,
kind
the
of made
question
several
is, why are you
points.
giving
You need to
information that's not
let-
true?
Let
That's
the commissioner
question.
finish the question, please, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Why are you giving information that's not true is my question and my concern, because the mobile outreach team is highly regarded in the community because of these types of claims. They're going out on a daily basis, but that's not true. I actually go out to the Desmond camp personally once a week as part of my outreach program, so I know for a fact that this is not true. I've also received letters from residents at the camp, and a lot of what you're saying about the mobile outreach team is just not true. So we can't audit the mobile outreach team as commissioners, it's not our jurisdiction. However, somebody in Lacey does need to take care of this because the support is not happening and there's a lot of funding going into this. Additionally, I am wondering if all people at the camp can be offered housing, not just those on the by name list.
So I know that there definitely are concerns about sort of process, right? And I think we just need to be, I think it's helpful for the city to understand kind of what those concerns are. But again, I think we also have to understand and appreciate sort of the jurisdictional boundaries, to know that they have the agreement with DES. They are following that agreement that they have. If there is, I think, operational suggestions that we offer them, but I think that ultimately comes to the city to sort of do, to take that information in and potentially review that, but.
Well, I'll respond to the question, if that's okay. In deference to your position, I will push back on some of your assertions, because I disagree with them. However, but I do want to correct one point. While we were going to issue notices, 72-hour notices on Thursday, that was the idea, if the pipes are not frozen, that's up to DES. Now, my understanding, they received some information late last night. I haven't received additional instructions from them if they want to assert the trespass at this time. So, just to be clear on that record. Now, the other assertions, frankly, I disagree with totally. I think the mobile outreach team is doing an outstanding job. They're one of the few credentialed agencies working to do outreach and de-escalation to folks in crisis, which I appreciate, and I hope everybody else does. Especially since the Sheriff's Department is using that same program that identified as Scout under the same auspices. So I guess I would have some questions. If MOT isn't a good program, then why is the County Sheriff's Department adopting the same model as a co-responder program? So I guess I have some pushback on that. But that being said, I think we've handled ourselves well, and I think we treat people well. So I'm sorry you have that perspective.
In the CRU, they're outstanding
Yes.
as well.
Right, and just to be clear, I never mentioned that mobile outreach team is not a good program. I'm not scrutinizing the program itself, but the comments you made about them going out on a daily basis, I think is misinformation, and I think the community needs to have some clarity around that. Because at the Desmond camp particularly, which is what we're talking about today, that's just not happening. And we can disagree on that, but it's a fact. So we'll need to, I do think that while there are jurisdictional boundaries, as Rob mentioned, and we need to respect those jurisdictional boundaries, I think the community needs to be clear on what's happening and when the mobile outreach team is going out, because on surface level, if you read about the mobile outreach team, it sounds great. And I agree with that model, but as it's being implemented, there's just some misinformation going around regarding that.
My next was Interim County Manager Campbell. Okay, then I have Commissioner Fournier, who had his hand up. Commissioner Fournier, you're up if you're still there.
I'm thinking.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards' hand just went up. I'll come back to you, Commissioner Fournier. Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Well, I think what I would like to point out here is this is a very tough position for Lacey to be in, and nothing ever goes perfectly or goes off without a hitch. But I want to thank the city of Lacey for coming and explaining this to us so we have a better understanding. And I just think it's a very well thought out, very thoughtful process that they've got in place. And I frankly wish other jurisdictions would maybe look to this model, and maybe we wouldn't have the problems that we're having, because these problems continue to escalate, but they don't seem to continue to escalate in Lacey. And that says a lot for the citizens of Lacey, for the service that they're getting. So I just want to thank you very much for the Lacey folks to come and kind of explain things to us. Thanks a lot.
Commissioner Fournier.
I guess I kind of want to say that I appreciate the Lacey delegation, I guess, and the chief coming and talking to the county about this, because they don't have to. And so I appreciate your willingness, and there's always ways that we can all collaborate better. And I think that, that's what Commissioner Klaus is hoping for. So, just in that spirit, I appreciate this conversation. I did hear the chief say earlier that they have reached out to the individuals in this camp and they've rejected services. Can you speak to that, Chief?
Oh, I think he was asking you.
Okay. Well, it's my understanding that the DES is in receipt of a message from an attorney that's representing 3 or 4 individuals at that site that are choosing not to accept Maple Court and would like some other type of accommodation.
And the reason being?
Oh, they're varied. I would leave that to DES, but basically it's an ADA type of accommodation, is my understanding. But again, I would leave that to DES, the property owner.
Okay. I had heard comments that there were individuals that were not wanting to go to Maple Court because Maple Court is a low, I think it's called a low barrier facility, or there's certain activities like drug use that are tolerated, and some of these individuals that are in the Desmond camp are sober individuals and they don't feel safe going into Maple Court. Is there any truth in your experience to that?
Yes, it's a low barrier shelter, but again, the county contracts with Lehigh is able to enforce the rules at that location, so I would leave that to the county contract, yeah, how they operate Lehigh.
Okay, thank you.
But back to kind of the original point, those decisions need to be made by DES, the property owner, not, we won't be making those decisions on their behalf on whether to accommodate or not.
I'm not alluding to that. I'm just curious that, you know, we're all investing a lot of money and resources into creating facilities that are safer for these houseless folks to go to. And, you know, if we're missing the mark on some of that, I would want to know more.
Well, that goes back towards the contract, I believe, that Lehigh and Commerce entered into with the county and the criteria that Commerce laid on the funding of that facility. So I think that also weighs in on that discussion.
But that, you know, that the need for.
Just for clarification, it wasn't just the county, it was regionally, just all of the regional housing council partners agreed on this.
So regionally, and this is a huge topic at the RHC, and the primary reason it exists is we need more housing at all levels to move people out of homelessness and to the point of the highest place they can live, hopefully market rate housing. But enhanced shelters are one part of that, but we need more permanent supportive housing. We need more emergency shelters. We need more of everything in the region, and that's the goal of the RHC and all the jurisdictional partners to leverage those dollars. The right-of-way initiative, frankly, was a bit of a blessing because it's funding what will become community resources through the state dollars that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think we need to be thankful for everything that we can do because of those dollars.
So there are some deeper questions that I've heard, but one of the kind of more surface level issues that kind of brought this conversation and prompted us to schedule this was just about the timeline and what's happening. It sounds like from staff that even though this was known in a larger sense, the specific date of what is going to happen is a little shorter than other prior camp, whatever we're going to call it, not a sweep, but a movement or closure. Okay, so it sounds like that's what created that in addition, and what I haven't heard, I asked that question about personal property because I was being read yesterday, my staff and the county manager was talking to city manager Lacey, was hearing a timeline, and then I was being shown a DES notice that was being put up at the thing that suggested a very different timeline for the very same activity. So that's what got, I think, me feeling like, yeah, some things not being communicated in terms, and I'm not just pointing any fingers, but I mean, we were just being asked all kinds of questions and not able to answer them given those contrary piece of information. So I'm asking my board, I guess, does everyone understand the explanation of what's going to happen versus, vis-a-vis those arguably conflicting pieces of information? Are we comfortable that we know what's happening so we can answer questions of our community members? Commissioner Edwards says thumbs up. Are you familiar with the notice that I'm talking about, the DES?
And it was very blunt, yeah.
Okay.
But
so you understand where we were coming from in terms of our
That was
confusion?
from that notice.
That was from the state, number one. That's not our notice,
Yeah.
to be clear.
But the people at the camp, it doesn't,
But
it's
also,
the government.
it doesn't, that notice wasn't to illustrate the entire judicial process. It was simply put them on notice, hey, this camp is being closed on this date, or in the very near future, you'll be given 72 hours notice. You need to accept
They
services.
talked about cleanup, and you were saying property's not being touched, so that's where I'm trying
Well, it
to make
doesn't,
sure.
right, and then until the camp is vacated, it's not cleaned up. And we don't do the cleanup. Again, that's the state. The only cleanups we would ever do is if it was on city property. We don't touch private property, we don't touch state property. So again, that's not our purview, that's not our whole goal.
So even though you're saying property's not being touched, it's possible the state could come in and do something different.
That's not my understanding. My understanding is they only touch vacated camps, not while people are there. They don't want interaction with, they want to do a conflict, they're not involved in that.
So either Rob or I can certainly contact someone at DES and ask them what they're doing, but I, trust the city working with DES knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah, frankly, we're waiting for their response to the letter last night, to see how they want to proceed.
That letter being the legal.
Yes.
Plus, I didn't know that there's something with pipes at Maple Court. Is that because of
Yes.
the cold temperatures
Yeah.
or something? Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Keely?
Yeah, I thinking about the timeline and the process, there was a process and a timeline that was, came from Department of Commerce at the beginning of this, I believe the beginning of this fiscal year prior to the ERP proposal going out. So the row and ERP are the same, but the encampment resolution program is specific funding that's going towards purchasing a hotel and Quint Street Village funding. But within the ERP proposal and with right-of-way, there is a timeline that all the partners agreed to for the removal of a camp. And it's just occurring to me. So I think looking up that, because this is under the ERP or right-of-way, and overseen by the state partners, and that timeline I think would be helpful to clarify, like, what is it that actually can be expected from any right-of-way project, any removal?
I think though that this is a little different in that the Department of Enterprise Services owns this land.
Right.
And
They need to
so
talk to each
it
other.
may be that those agreement for working with the county on properties owned by either the county or the cities would be executed under completely different circumstances than a piece of property that is owned by a state department.
I think that's fundamentally the issue with the right-of-way, is that it's very confusing because it's contradictory depending on the camp, the jurisdiction. And it's been a moving target and very confusing from day one, so.
Is there ever anyone, and I'm sorry for
Yeah, go ahead.
being here, anyone from Commerce or et cetera that comes to the Regional Housing Council? I'm just wondering in terms of, some of the confusion, right? Because it's based on jurisdictional boundaries, et cetera, if that would help kind of eliminate some of the confusion if there was that.
It's a state program run through the Department of Commerce for local jurisdictions. That's the right-of-way program. Which is very different than the state managing its own property.
Okay, anyone else? A question, an issue to discuss with our Lacey folks? Thank you very much. I echo the comments of my seatmates we know you don't have to be here, and it's really helpful to us to hear what's going on and to have this chance to communicate.
Well, we appreciate the collaboration.
Next time?
Say again?
Annexations next time?
Next
Okay.
time. Well, again, we appreciate the collaboration. We really are trying to find people better outcomes. That is really our sole source and goal here, and that is really what we always try to shoot for. And that means a lot of things to different people, and we understand that. And everyone has their own measure of success. But we really try to build relationships. We try to offer as many services as possible and gather as many services together. And the city of Lacey really has invested a lot in this effort, so we really appreciate the collaboration. Thank you.
Commissioner Mejia's hand.
Thank you.
I'll defer to the commissioner.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for being here today and for clarifying a lot of the questions that we had. I still would like to have this conversation at the Regional Housing Council, just again to see how we can support the individuals who are not moving for one reason or another. And especially since, you know, there's a hazardous weather event. I think that's my biggest concern. But I do appreciate both of you being here. I know that, you know, you don't have to answer to us, but just the fact that you're here to provide that information is appreciated. So.
Commissioner Klaus?
So I was just wondering, because we're still talking about if we can stall until the Regional Housing Council meeting, and I'm wondering who makes that decision to stall this process until that meeting? Is that Lacey or is that DES? Okay.
The Department of Enterprise Services would, is, if you will, in control of the when.
Okay.
I would say though that the way this process is described and the concept that 72-hour notice will be issued, but at the end of that 72 hours, if someone is still at that camp, they will not be forced to leave in that moment. Their possessions will not be taken in that moment, but instead that will kick in a court process. A citation will be issued, that goes to the court, that takes a few weeks. That is exactly the process that buys time to get this in front of the Regional Housing Council.
That's what the city manager described to us.
And that is exactly what
just
the city
confused by
manager described and what we understood would be the process. And it certainly gives time to get in front of the RHC next week.
Thank you.
But it was that notice from DES that I think
It was
threw everyone off.
the cleanup notice that triggered anxiety.
Yeah. So the other question that I didn't hear an answer for yet, this might be a DES question too, but for the people who are not on the by name list, who acts as the liaison, or who can answer the question of them being offered housing, whether it's at Maple Court or somewhere else? Do we know who could speak to that?
Like I said, we offer services to everybody. However, if they're not on an approved list by the property owner, in this case DES, then they're trespassed immediately. So there's no secondary list. They're trespassed.
So,
They have to leave the property.
when you say they're trespassed immediately, again,
Yep.
that
They're subject to
it says
citation if they don't leave.
citation and due process through the courts. So not immediately as in you have to leave right now.
Trespass is like is a formal, for you to be able to issue
Yeah,
a citation.
we're all trying
you
to
have to be able,
understand.
you have to
Right,
give
there's not a
notice to
3-day
someone.
notice. There's, hey, here's your citation, you're here to
It
leave.
doesn't mean exactly maybe what
Same
you're.
like if you were in a grocery store and they told you to leave, you didn't leave, you get a citation, same thing.
Yeah, but they'd also have someone escort me to the door.
Well, yes, right, but
Couldn't stay
the
there
idea,
for a few
but the idea is, hey, we need you to leave. He said, I'm not leaving, I want to buy my groceries.
Right.
And like, well, no, we're refusing service, you need to leave, you're trespassed. You'd be escorted out and issued a citation for trespass, but you court date at a later time.
Right. Again, a little different because I can't stay there for a few weeks, but it sounds like people in these camps.
It sounds like the answer to your question, maybe the RHC is the only place to
Exactly.
go for,
Okay.
and that's what Commissioner Mejia, I
Gotta
think, was
work
gonna
through the
try
RHC.
to work toward about looking for emergency funding. And Keely, you know better than I do, obviously. Go ahead.
I just had a question. It occurred to me that Martin v. Boise, like how this factors in, because I know Martin v. Boise is considered is not a consideration for the rights of way, which are the interchanges, because they're unsafe. But since this isn't necessarily an interchange, it's on public property. I'm just curious if Martin v. Boise, what does that mean? Because that hasn't been addressed.
Is it
So-
considered public property or is it considered private property?
I don't
So
know.
Martin
That
v.
would be the
Martin v.
question.
Boise speaks to hours of darkness, sleeping overnight, doesn't talk about encampments per se. So I would leave that to the AG's office, because they're the representative counsel for DES as a state agency. And so again, not something the city of Lacey is involved with on this particular case.
Just curious. Occurred to me that it might be.
Well, I had the same question, because when we keep talking about private property owner, it's like, it's the government is the private property owner. I mean, it's not a private property owner, it's DES. So to me, that did raise, like, is this where does this fall in terms of that case? Because we're not talking about strip along I-5, which I completely understand the safety concern there. Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, I'd just like to point out that when they talk about safety at these camps that are located in close proximity to the interstate, we've had quite a few instances, not just in Thurston County, but I'll just use I-5 as an example, in which individuals from these camps end up on the freeway and they get run over and killed, and it ruins lives of the individuals that are involved in those accidents, as well as it takes a life of the individual. So it is very much an unsafe location to have camps. So I believe it falls under that. Thank you.
If I could just make a final point, and I think all of us, I'll look at Keely and Tom here, but all of us involved in the right-of-way initiative are looking forward to it being over so that we can use the resources that have been provided to us from the state funding for the coordinated entry system, which is the prioritization that we hopefully should be using to place people based on, as Keely has noted a couple times, people-based, not site-based, which is the right-of-way program basic premise. So hopefully we can get this all through this and use the resources that the state's provided us.
It'll be really interesting in the next year and a half or so as we have new housing goals in our comprehensive plans and really planning for that segment of our population in a way that we haven't necessarily before, and pulling in conversations of RHC into that, et cetera, to really kind of say, how do we incentivize the creation of that capacity? Because planning is just one thing, right? The creation is another, and that is probably the bigger lift. To make sure that we have the diversity of the whole continuum of services that we need in the community.
Okay, appreciate you guys, and we're adjourned for the session.
Thank you.